We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
Good evening, folks. You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper.
Is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
Time, weather, and
Veteran of 3 foreign wars, entrepreneur, and warrior poet, Tony Arterburn takes on the issues facing our country, civilization, and planet. This is the Arterburn radio transmission.
Happy birthday. I'm not going to sing the birthday song, though. That would be inappropriate. It's ironic. I'm just ironically thinking of happy birthday, as I do every year around this time, and sometimes the show falls right on the day. It's the birthday of the Illuminati, ladies and gentlemen, May 1st, 1776. But I bring that up because they share a birthday. Who's they? Well, just happenstance, right? Just coincidence. It's also the celebration of worldwide communism. When I found that out, and I learned that, I believe, from James Perloff, who wrote Truth is a Lonely Warrior. And I remember just reading, this is years ago, I remember reading through that and I go, why is that not just like a total exposure of the entire system? Like you get this shadowy Luciferian group of controllers that manipulate the money supply, happen to share the same celebratory day as worldwide communism, which is the operation systems for Satanism in the material world. I mean, it's so apparent. Those are the kind of historical coincidences, I'm putting these in quotations, that should be taught in schools. And then that really just kind of shows the fraud, right? You have the same people who, Red Square would have all these massive, parades with all the nukes and the land army that the Soviet Union had, Stalin standing there saluting people. And it's the same day that, again, founded Adam Weishaupt, 1776, and the Illuminati. And that's both of those things, especially communism, with Karl Marx. Nobody talks about that, but where did he get his funding? Well, he got his funding from a group of shadowy figures. Imagine that history doesn't shed too much light on. They were called the League of Just Men. And they had, we do know that they had ties to the House of Rothschild. So that's the way history works. It's not organic, folks. It's not what you're taught in schools. It's not a series of accidents. Some stuff is. Some things, because this is God's world ultimately, and there are chance and free will. But, the bigger themes of history are caused by things that are set into motion. I think that's a lot of what we're watching here today. So it is the 1st of May, 2025. Can you believe you made it this far? I remember 5 years ago talking about this particular day and what happened. And I remember my dog Layla was a big part of my life. She was to pass away about 5 days later. And I'll never forget that, because I just felt it was a little bit ominous. Don't feel ominous today. I feel pretty optimistic, even with the headlines, and we don't even have to get into too much of the headlines. I want to cover some parapolitics and some precious metals today. I talked to David Knight earlier, and, we've watched some history unfolding in the financial markets, and there's a bit of a pullback right now on the price of gold. I'll get into that a little bit, but I think this is a temporary lull. There's an outlier in the price of silver and what that tells us about what's next on the horizon. But, we're about to see a possible supply shock that we haven't, and just basic products and stuff that we get from overseas, and especially places like the Chinese. A lot of this, what has been set into motion, has a delayed reaction. Like just even the hint or the threat of tariffs have caused a lot of these multinationals and different, conglomerates to reroute trade. And if this is also showing up, it showed up in the precious metals market. I talked about that months ago when this was just opened up in the opening salvo of the tariffs. A lot of these bullion banks started moving their supply out of their vaults, and it caused a cascading effect of contracts to be called, and a lot of those contracts for precious metals, and it screwed up the manipulation game. It screwed up the price manipulation. That was the black swan event. That could also be coming here with the slowdown in Chinese imports. I want to go to an article that's up on Kitco. Let's pull this. Let's cover a little bit of economics first, shall we? Let's put this up on the screen. This is Kitco. I thought this was an interesting conversation. No one's talking about it. Clem Chambers warns of supply chain shock, says that gold price could hit $10,000. A looming supply chain breakdown could trigger a financial avalanche that markets aren't prepared for, warns Clem Chambers, CEO of online blockchain and founder of newfn.com. Speaking to Kitco News, Chambers said that while markets obsess over inflation and rate policy, no one's talking about the supply chain. Well, that's what I was talking with David Knight about today. We're both seeing the same thing. And that silence is the real red flag, he says. If you imagine that 30% of American food is packaged in Chinese packaging, what happens when suddenly there's no containers full of stuff, he asked. Chambers said the danger isn't hypothetical. If Trump doesn't do some incredible U-turn, which is not really his style, then what happens next is going to be really dramatic, he warned, suggesting that food packaging shortages could trigger 6 to 7% food inflation and cascading retail disruptions. Well, we saw some of this during the lockdowns of COVID-1984, and there's hundreds of thousands of small businesses that started to close up. And one of the side issues with that, one of the supply chains disruptions that happened with that was just actual coins. Remember, that was a big thing back in the 2020. People ask, what happened to all the coins? My bank doesn't have coins. I'm like, because they shut down hundreds of thousands of small businesses, and they're not making their deposits. That's the car washes and the laundry mats and all the other stuff that you're shutting down. The convenience stores, everything that they're shutting down, the small shops without making those deposits. That's one thing, but that's internal supply. Now we're talking about external supply. According to the Federal Reserve's latest financial stability survey, 73% of respondents now rank the trade war as the top threat to U.S. financial stability, surpassing banking and geopolitics. Well, it's unfortunate that can I just say something for the record? Because this isn't what we're watching, I think, is more of a controlled demolition of the financial system than it is a strategy. But you've been in a trade war. We lost. You can look at the metrics. I've been saying this for years. When I ran for Congress, I brought this up. I mean, the greatest transfer of wealth in human history prior to where we are now was the gutting and the giving away of America's manufacturing. I've talked about this many, many times. We have been in a trade war for the past 50 years. It just wasn't up to us. We didn't have those. We could see that we're having the Rust Belt, that we're losing jobs, and Ross Perot called it a giant sucking sound. It's a giant sucking sound. It's what happens when you have NAFTA, right? We've been in it. We lost that war. We gave the Chinese most favored nation trading status in WTO. September 11th, not September, December 11th, 2001, 90 days after 9/11. 55,000 factories gone, 1 in 3 manufacturing jobs. See, I know this stuff backwards and forwards. And so you've been in a trade war. It's just now that if you want to try to turn the tide, it looks pretty bad because you have to give up a lot of the conveniences. We became a consumer nation, not a producing nation. We used to be the greatest creditor. Did you know that? Do you know that the United States used to be the world's greatest creditor? And now we're the world's greatest debtor. And those countries are now selling off U.S. treasuries hand over fist. Gold, often a barometer of systemic risk, recently hit an all-time high near $3,500 per ounce. Chambers said this is no coincidence. Gold is for war, he stated bluntly. It's breaking out because people are getting sweaty. Governments are getting sweaty and they're buying gold. I like that. Yeah, it's where you run to. That's history, folks. And I think that's why I'm, depending on some of the outcomes of some of these short-term issues, and we're in this decade, which is the culmination of what historians Strauss and Howe called a fourth turning. And, a turning is about every 80 to 100 years in a historical cycles. It actually adds up if you do the logic and you reverse the timeline. I mean, about 80 years ago, I'm actually right at 80 years ago, we were ending World War II. Matter of fact, we'd be 7 days away from VE Day, which is Victory in Europe, also Harry Truman's birthday, May 8th, 1945. So about 80 years. And that was the end of that cycle, which, basically started to kick off with the Great Depression and then World War II. And if you reverse that back 80 years, you get the Civil War. And then, of course, Lincoln in his Gettysburg Address talked about that. He mentioned 80, which is 80 years. 87 years, 87 years. That was the American Revolution. And it was 80 years from the cycle of the American Revolution to the great turning of the Civil War. So history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes, right? But it is cyclical. And we are entering into the end of this fourth turning, and hopefully we can avoid cataclysmic war and other things. We're definitely in a trade war. We're definitely in a currency war. We're in an asymmetrical, nonlinear war. And it's global, but it's maybe not what you think, right? He added that Poland is loading up, and with China and others likely to follow, you can't be short gold. The thing's gonna fly. Chambers, who first flagged 3,500 as a breakout level, now sees $5,000 inside and possibly more. That ramping cycle initially, I thought, was 3,500. Now looks like 5,000, and it's potentially 10,000 if the tension keeps getting worse and worse. Yeah, David asked me today, what happens if we hit a recession? What happens if there's a major market downturn? And a lot of that could come from inflation or something you call stagflation. We had stagflation in the 1970s, which was inflation, high unemployment, and low economic growth. And you would get that through supply chain disruptions, rising prices. People would have to decide what's priority to pay. I'm going to get in. There's another story while we're on economics. I'll get into. There's something happened, and I think it's an alarm bell for how people are paying for groceries. But we'll get into that. There's going to be a lot of market conditions that show us a recession and a downturn. People will get into gold because of that, but they may sell off first. It doesn't go linear. It doesn't just keep rising and go up and to the right. That's not how any of this stuff works. But that's the trend, and I don't think he's wrong about that. Again, I don't do this show to give you investment advice. I'm not even sure what a good investment is right now, other than investing in yourself, with your own things, being your own bank. It says on Bitcoin, Chambers warned that while it remains the frothy asset of crisis liquidity, It's also vulnerable to severe drawdown. Bitcoin is for flight, he said. If there's any group of people that need to leg it out of their town, Bitcoin will do on a run. I'll interpret that for you. If you need to go somewhere, you need to get out of the country, you got to move from location to location. He's not wrong about that. If you liquidated everything and put it in Bitcoin and had your keys and put it on your wallet that's not linked to an exchange and you want to go, it's pretty perfect for that. But he's also right, even though I have a Bitcoin company, he's also right about the volatility. And I think the times in which we live, I mean, Bitcoin is for a world where there's cooperation, where there's markets, where we're not, constantly under the threat of World War III or some sort of international crisis. It's about expanding those markets and creating, decentralized hubs and a new economic system. It's the new. Bitcoin represents the new, not the old, but in that transitionary period, who knows what the price is going to be? A lot of people, I'm honestly, folks, I'm shocked that the price is as low as it is on Bitcoin. Given the fact of when I started talking about BlackRock in January of 2024, when I got on, I did a live stream just driving, and I told you, I think Bitcoin was at like low 30s or whatever it was. And I said, hey, this is huge. This is what's about to happen is monumental. And you have BlackRock and other institutions creating these ETFs. Not that I even really support that, but I just knew it's a numbers game about supply. And as soon as they started increasing that supply, or decreasing that supply rather, and then holding it, it's going to drive the price up. And there's a lot of metrics to support that. I mean, it's never been the exchanges like Coinbase and Gemini and Kraken and other things. The coins aren't matching the supply that they had 2 years ago. I think they're down like 1 million. It's not a lot of open coins. I think it's only like 1.5 million. And I could be wrong on that within the margin of error, but it's not that many coins. So you're talking about a supply shock. So the price, I think, reflects even still the volatility of people not knowing what's next. So he's not wrong about that. He cautioned that once those pressures subside, then it's coming down to 60,000. He's talking about the pressures of, market volatility, and then the stocks and other things and conditions that the unknown. I don't know that it'll get that far down, but it definitely is feeling the pressure of the trade war. Chambers was more critical of crypto than in past interviews, expressing increasing concern about its integration with the traditional finance of Wall Street. It says they buy their yachts and their mansions, fly in their private jets off the back of the investor, he said. Now it's going to be a constant drain. Now, it's like 10% own 90% of the stocks. On regulation, Chambers said that the U.S. is finally creating room for blockchain innovation. Now America's regularizing it out that will enable the true value, and it's huge. I think there's some truth to that. I'm skeptical, like I spoke with David Knight this morning, I'm skeptical of the stable coins and whatever the hell they mean. I can see what they're doing. It's like repackaging something. It's like a really bad MLM or network marketing deal that they just rebrand. It's the same thing, just restarting it. But that's what they're doing with stable coins. But it could be more sinister than that. And then kind of the back door for central bank digital currency. The only crypto I trade in regularly is Bitcoin, and I don't see that changing in the near term at all. Yeah, he's like me. He's like, I hope I'm wrong. I really, really, really hope I'm wrong. I have no fun, and it gives me no pleasure to make money off of people's troubles. I have the same problem. And if you go back and listen to my shows from years ago, like the continuity of predicting cycles is not that far off. I mean, I'm actually a little bearish. I didn't predict $3,500 an ounce gold, folks, because I didn't think we were quite there in the cycle. Was wrong about that. I thought it was more like when we hit $2,500 an ounce in August of last year, I thought we'll definitely see the road to 3,000 in 2025, 2026. Well, we're way past that. Now 3,000 is the floor. And I don't see us pulling back from that. I'll get into spot price later. We're well over $3,200 an ounce. And I think it's just from some profit taking. I was reading some reports. The Chinese, and I'll hang a question mark over this. The Chinese sold off about 1 million ounces, just kind of impromptu. And a lot of investors followed because people watch China. And if you don't know the numbers like I do, or at least I think I do, right? This is my wheelhouse. This is what I read all day long. If you go back to the beginning of the 21st century, China, once it got let in with most favored trading status of between nations with the United States, when it was let into that in the WTO, December 11th, 2001, it started to quietly buy gold, like quietly. It was doing it off the books. It was doing it through its intermediaries and companies and holdings that it had. They started buying it in large quantities. Now, they've been buying gold since Mao Zedong passed away in the 1970s. They started to acquire more and more, but it really ramped up in the 21st century. And there's been a plan, like they're long-term thinkers. So they start accumulating. And again, these stories would pop up every once in a while where you would see, so many tons were bought by a private investor, and they would trace it back to the Chinese, right? It would eventually go back to the Chinese government. So something interesting to watch there. But I noticed that there was something, again, with the metrics of it. There was a Kitco reporter that talked about this about 6 or 7 months ago, and it caught my eye that the total gold holdings of the Chinese probably more than rival the United States. Because, hey, by the way, what's the latest from the Fort Knox audit? Did I miss that? Did I miss that live stream, ladies and gents? I told you that what happened. It was a big thing, and now it's not. Yeah, you start asking those kind of questions. It's really uncomfortable. There's 2 different sets of books for the gold holdings of the U.S. If you look at it at the end of World War II, we're supposed to have about 16,000 tons. And actually, what happened is they cut that in half and said about half of that, so about 8,000 tons, is on a receivable contract to the Federal Reserve Bank, right? Not federal, not a reserve. And the other half is supposedly split between Fort Knox and the Federal Reserve Bank holdings of the U.S. Treasury. So let's say we have 8,000 tons. That's what the marker is. Well, some people estimate the Chinese have way more than that. That's neither here nor there. The reason I say that is because as gold continues to go higher, it puts a panic and a strain on the dollar, which, the weaker dollar is what everybody desires in these circles, especially through trade. Well, the Chinese sell off these 1 million ounces really quick, and the gold pulls back. It starts to strengthen the U.S. dollar. So there's something underlying in that. Just the little things like these are little subtle headlines that I go, I wonder what that means. But they're thinking long term, but these little short term things, again, it strengthens the dollar. That's not what the current U.S. administration wants. U.S. administration wants a weaker dollar. It's like I brought that up with David this morning. He made me think about it in a different way. It's good that the current administration wants a weaker dollar. That's the whole point of. That's why Trump has been bashing Jerome Powell. It's like lower interest rates. You're not fast enough. You're not quick on this. You got to do QE. You got to do quantitative easing. The Chinese just basically strengthened the dollar de facto, and they did some profit taking. So these are the kind of the headlines aren't really the headlines. It's language, folks. So something interesting to watch there. Pay attention to it. And I want to talk about silver too. It's something that continues to roll through my mind. And I talk to my customers and people calling in to Wise Wolf and other asking me questions about this. And I do meditate on it and think about it, and I roll it over and sleep on it. I just really long-term silver right now. Short-term gold, long-term silver. You see these articles that'll pop up. Even the World Bank is saying, well, gold's going to outshine silver this year. And it's kind of baffling people because it's 100 to 1, folks. It takes 100 ounces of silver to make 1 ounce of gold. That is not history. History's never had that before. This has never happened, not even close. In the ground, geologically, is 17 to 1. That's the estimate from geologists. And then you have just history in general, going back to the ancient Egyptians, the Babylonian Empire, the Syrian Empire, Alexander the Great. It was 10 to 1. Sometimes it's a little bit more. Sometimes if it's a weird cycle, it's 20 to 1, but never 100 to 1. So you're looking at something I think is an artificial construct, and somebody somewhere wants it to continue that way because there's a lot of attention paid to, whether it's J.P. Morgan Chase that got convicted of manipulating the silver market and suppressing the price. And then you go and like, well, wait, J.P. Morgan Chase is the largest holder, a private holder of silver in the world. Why would they want to make the price go down? Because it's not your typical commodity. There's something else to it. It's also a monetary metal as well as an industrial metal. There's something with silver. Name me a commodity, and maybe I'm wrong on this. Is it the only commodity that's all-time high was 45 years ago? How can you have an all-time high 45 years ago in anything? The dollar, it's over $52 an ounce in 1980. I just asked this openly. It doesn't make any sense. I think if you're long silver and you could hold, which I need to do more and more of. I mean, I've got my inventory, but this is something I may just start really thinking about long term. What's that silver price going to do against the dollar when it's an outlier? So gold short term, silver long term, and especially in these weird trade wars and supply shocks. All right, and I'm going to get to the chat here in a second too, and then I want to read this article by Caitlin Johnstone. I thought it was appropriate on the birthday of the Illuminati, which is a real thing, by the way. It may not be like I get these emails sometimes, and they're not spoofing. They're just like they're just preying on people, or who knows? Like they want you to respond to them. But it's like you're invited to to join the Illuminati. We'll get you a membership card, and I guess you get invited to Eyes Wide Shut parties, or you get to go worship a 50-foot owl representing Moloch at Bohemian Grove or something. But it's just so funny to me. It doesn't really work that way. It's more of a faith. It's Luciferianism, right? This is just the inversion of what you would think of as a biblically centered world, right? Or your viewpoint of right and wrong. They just have a different viewpoint, right? This is the viewpoint of the elites. They're illuminated. They know something you don't, and then they have their own religion. It's their own faith. It's their own construct and understanding reality, and they may try to dress it up and say, well, it's not Satan, it's Lucifer. Right. It's just their way of saying that the snake in the garden was the good guy. That's their philosophy. It's Promethean, right? That that's the Prometheus myth, that because the snake showed man the difference between good and evil, and ye shall be as gods, right? That's their take. It's to rule over you. They think they're better than you, and then they create constructs like communism. Yeah, the next time one of your lefty friends starts really getting, if you ever, and it's hard to talk to them, but if you can be nice and just kind of show them some of this history, like how'd you get funding for that? That's always my favorite thing to do. History's fun like that, and especially not the one you're taught in school, because you're like, well, wait a minute. Then they're like, all of a sudden there was a dictator and he's got a little mustache and he takes over an empire. And I'm like, how did he get there? Who funded him? Shut up, Arterburn. You're really asking way too many questions. Was it Wall Street? You ever read Anthony Sutton's work back in the 70s? He was Oxford, worked at the Hoover Institute, wrote a book called Wall Street and the Rise of the Third Reich. He wrote a book called Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. Just some light reading. All right, let's more on the economy, and then I'll go to the chat. I try to pick out the headlines for you folks that are not exactly mainstream stuff, just to give you a little bit of an insight on how my mind works, like what's next. All right, let's check this out. This is just, I thought this was the best format. Natural News put this out. The buy now, pay later, a growing trend for groceries amid economic uncertainty. Buy now, pay later tab on groceries, folks. A significant shift is occurring in the use of buy now, pay later services, with 25% of users now utilizing them for grocery purchases, a sharp rise from 14% in 2024. This trend is even more pronounced among Gen Z, with 33% opting for buy now, pay later for groceries. BNPL, initially popular for luxury items, is now increasingly used for everyday essentials like groceries and food delivery. This change is driven by rising prices and economic uncertainties as consumers seek flexible payment options. The survey of 2,000 American adults revealed that 41% of buy now, pay later users made late payments in the past year, up from 34% the previous year. Additionally, 23% of users have 3 or more active loans, simultaneously indicating a potential for financial strain and overspending. The rise in buy now, pay later usage for groceries is linked to economic concerns, with half of Americans expressing worry about potential recession. It's also seen as a way to bridge the gap for the next paycheck, especially as inflation and higher interest rates erode purchasing power. These are the metrics to really pay attention to. And I bring this up not for alarmism, but this is the same kind of stuff that I saw at 28. I was running a really high volume, had ownership in a convenience store, but it was, had like 20 pumps and had a pharmacy in it and a barbecue restaurant. It was a big operation. And I started seeing when they had the housing market, it was red hot. And I was also in real estate at the time. So I was watching this, but there was a significant pullback, and you would listen to the financial networks and they tell you everything was fine. But I was watching real-time purchases, and this is in North Texas, near Dallas. So it's, a pretty good sampling of what the average consumer buys, middle of the road. Even you can consider upper middle class in a portion of the demographic. So I was watching it really close. And so you would see this pullback of sales that otherwise you would have always gotten on the inside. So there was same amount of sales outside. So people kept filling their tanks, but there was a big pullback in what was considered, the, impulse buys, or just to have extra income. And so these things started to dissipate. But again, mainstream wasn't buying into this because people were paying more, and it was inflation of the money supply, the rising cost of energy. And what is happening is at the same time they were buying things like energy. They were buying things for their car. They were paying for the heat in their home. They were doing stuff like that. But their loans were starting to default. Those interest rates were adjusting, and those adjustable rate mortgages, all that stuff was happening because it's very similar to what's happening now. And you had the economy was a lot more sound back then. Like the fundamentals were more sound. Now you have where we've crossed this Rubicon of massive debt, and the debt to GDP ratio, like I bring up all the time, it's like 125%. And we add $1 trillion to the balance every 100 days. So all those metrics are kind of adding up, and you're seeing that you throw in the trade war, the tariff threat, the supply shock, and all that, then you get this. And it's an indicator. It's a signpost. It's something to pay attention to. Not that you'll see almost any of this on mainstream. While buy now, pay later offers a convenient way to manage cash flow, it carries risks such as late fees and the potential for overspending. It's a sign of growing financial strain. A significant portion of Americans are turning to buy now, pay later. And this is according to Lending Tree. 25%, folks, using it for groceries. And then you're talking about an idea of being on a fixed income or having not being able to easily increase the amount of dollars that you make. You get less and less. And that's how it works in a fiat system. That's the evil behind it. Speaking of the Illuminati. All right, I'm going to go to the chat really quick, and then we'll get into this article I saw by Caitlin Johnstone. That was really good, and it brought up a great question. Let's go to the comments really quick. Oh, I see Billy Ray Valentine in the chat on X. Good to see you, Billy. Oh, I see 804 Marty says, appreciate your shortwave broadcast on WWCR. That's 12160 WWCR, Worldwide Christian Radio. Sounds great today. Well, thank you, Marty. Yeah, that's one of the, I love, I've been with WWCR for 5 years, and we're on the same network, and that was Bill Cooper. And I signed that contract 5 years ago on Bill Cooper's birthday. I didn't plan that, by the way, but that's when I signed the contract. So I love being over on WWCR, and great audience there. Shortwave and terrestrial radio. I love that I can be there, even with all this technology, because that might be the last place I broadcast, given the volatility of all these platforms. You just never know. I want to check the Rumble chat as well. I see Gar Goldsmith popping in. If you guys don't know who the great Gar Goldsmith is and you hear my voice, go check him out. Liberty Conspiracy, a Renaissance man of the highest order, and puts out an amazing amount of content. I don't know how he does it. You think I'm busy. Go check out what Gard's doing, and some quality content. I see Christoa, good day, Tony. Hi, Guard's there. And then Freethinker 43, good to see you. We have a Possum King. Good chat activity over on Rumble. We're working on it. Guard says, I like how Tony handles the news. Very smooth. I can do it. It's an hour a week, and I figure we'll just have a conversation. I'll pick the headlines of this timeline that I think are the most pressing. And a lot of times we're going to get into geopolitics, some economics, stuff that it's going to affect you. But I try to stay out of the politics now. Parapolitics, of course, because that's like the paranormal. Outside of the parapolitical is something to study, but if you're tuning in for the politics, you're not going to get it from me. All right, we got enough time. We got enough to tackle this article by Caitlin Johnston, and this was up on LouRockwell.com. And I like Caitlin, but I think I share her foreign policy views. Let's put this up. Very skeptical of foreign wars, interventions, and the ruling class. But I love the headline. She says, "We are trapped in a dystopia that is ruled by lunatics." This is what grabbed my attention today. And, some of the content is absolutely on point. I mean, she's right about this. It says they're ripping kids in half right in front of us and telling us we need to be mad at Kneecap and Miss Rachel. It says we really need a name for mental illness that comes with obscene amounts of wealth. Elon Musk's bizarre progeny obsession. All the weird crap Michael Jackson did. The stories you hear about rich families making their servants clean their toilets after every use and throw away plates after every meal. Call it rich brain or something. I told you this was appropriate for the Illuminati. I don't want to spoil their birthday too bad, though. Actually, I do. The psychological phenomenon where extreme wealth causes people to lose their mental moorings and spin off into deep space because there's no one in their lives telling them no or holding them to any standards of normal human behavior, where the ability to shape their day-to-day lives however they want with no limitations lets them fly off into uncharted psychological territory where they'll have whole teams of people orchestrating elaborate scenes and projects to accommodate their debilitating neurosis. We need a good label for this phenomenon because these are the individuals who are shaping our world. And I love this because I remember right before I restarted this show, I had the Tony Arterburn show from 2013 and 14, and then I took a 4.5 year layoff, came back with the Arterburn radio transmission, and I was standing outside of my shop in San Antonio, and I just had this like thought washed over me. I was like, if it's how I understand that so much of things is not, they're scams, like the income tax and the entire system. It's like, oh, there's these like opposition, like controlled opposition. The people that have the ability to change the world for the better don't. Then it's really all you need to know. Like the people that could change the world, the people that have the influence, the amount of wealth that it would take. That either people tried to, used to, like Henry, you can read about Henry Ford. Henry Ford tried. He tried for peace, and what he gets labeled as a anti-Semite and racist and other things. That's his legacy, because I think that's a punishment for trying to do things like have a peace envoy, in World War I, or try to stop intervention in World War II. You definitely, there's a point here. When the rich have this isn't like, when I say rich, there's people that I don't even see the modern rich as entrepreneurs. I know entrepreneurs, like people that build things, the guy that has 5 Wendy's franchises and some apartment buildings and built something from the ground up. I've seen those people. They're geniuses, but you show me these people that have government contracts and, you go whether it's Musk or Bezos or whatever. I don't have any government contracts. Do you? We need a good label for this phenomenon because these are the individuals who are shaping our world. Many people suffering from psychological disorders will come up with unhealthy ideas for how society ought to be run, but they don't have the means to turn their vision into reality. The people who are made insane by obscene amounts of wealth are not restricted in this way. Their mental illness can actually directly influence how human civilization plays out on this planet. As billionaires take more and more control over our world, we are finding ourselves increasingly led by those least qualified to lead us. We are trapped in a dystopia that is ruled by lunatics. We should probably do something about that. I've been saying this for a long time. It harkens back to, I bring up the fact that, okay, whether you're talking about in the United States or whatever party in the Western world, especially, they're ruled by the same people, the same funders. If they wanted to do away with something like the tax system, then they would just snap their fingers. But they don't. And you think that's organic. No, it's because they like it that way. They like the system the way it is, or they change the system. I see this tweet she puts out. What is that, Jack Ma? How uncivilized here in the West we treat billionaires properly by letting them control every facet of our society. And she's talking about the Chinese billionaire who criticized the government. He vanished for 3 months. When he returned, he had lost 40 billion. His powerful voice controls over his company, Alibaba. Yeah. She says, they're ripping kids in half right in front of us, telling us we need to be mad at Kneecap and Miss Rachel. A Palestinian supporter witnesses new footage every day of children being mutilated, shredded, and burned to death by Israel. An Israel supporter spends every day avoiding looking at the same footage. Oh, it really is terrible. It really reminded me, I have such an aversion and a disgust for our Middle Eastern policy because I've lived it. I've been an instrument for it, and I'll have to, I'm sure, account to God eventually for my actions and my complicitness and some of it, which was, something I can live with. As a soldier, I was doing my duty, but you have to be over in these, you think about the disruption and what you caused, inadvertently to people that didn't deserve it or had nothing to do with whatever you were experiencing in your country. I've seen children displaced and, apartment buildings hit by smart bombs. I'm putting this in quotations. Just an absolute horrific crime that goes on in our Middle Eastern policy. And I remember I was so disgusted. I got back to stateside and I go to church or I meet people from these evangelical churches where I'd grown up, and they're like, oh, we just got to make that into a parking lot, just drop the big one on them. And I remember looking around and thinking, so genocide? Like, you're down for genocide. Like, where did you see Jesus talk about that? These Christian Zionists that were just so adamant about blood. They wanted blood. It's very satanic. And it's an unfortunate part of, especially the South. The South has a lot of that. They're like, we got to get over there. We got to turn it into a parking lot. Okay. Well, you didn't see what I did, and you don't have any nuance. That's a terrifying soul. A lot of evil can be done when you believe you're doing good. Says, when you witness an injustice, you can either oppose it, look away, or make some up reason why the injustice is okay. Only the first option can lead to the cessation of the injustice. Ignoring the Gaza Holocaust looks different from justifying it. Both yield to the same result. There are people opposing the genocide and there are people justifying it. But the largest group are by far those standing in the middle and shrugging. These people may tell themselves that they are morally superior or the ones actively cheerleading a mass atrocity. And at first glance, this may appear to be the case. But in practice, both are choosing an option that allows the mass atrocity to continue. One is just more photogenic than the other. It allows a certain type of person to feel nice about themselves while still facilitating an act of genocide. So this is almost everyone with the loudest and most influential voices in our society today, by the way, the celebrities, the people with the largest platforms. It's like most of them are not actively supporting the Gaza Holocaust. They're just sitting there watching it happen, like a psychopath sitting back and watching a toddler drown to death in a swimming pool. Yeah. It's funny because once you cross this barrier and you start talking about not only U.S. involvement, Israeli involvement, and the people say, well, you support the terrorists. No. Why does it have to be one or the other? We're that way in this country, this duality. Does your mind not work with other steps? Like, if I don't like Joe Biden, does that mean I like Trump and vice versa? Can I just not like them? Does it have to be an either or? Maybe I don't like the Israeli government supporting Hamas and funding it and creating it, or ISIS. Maybe I don't like that. She says that the result is the nightmare continues day after day, month after month, year after year, because too many people, when faced with history's first live stream genocide, have chosen to do nothing. Said it would be a mistake to view the Chinese people's skyrocketing quality of life as miraculous or extraordinary. Beijing made some very clear decisions over the years, but ultimately it's just doing the normal thing, spending the nation's wealth on the public instead of war. She's right about that. When capitalism simps want to crap on China, they call it communist. When they want to dismiss its accomplishments, they say it only happened because China became capitalist. When you ask why your country can't do what China is doing in order to share those same accomplishments with circle back around, they say, no, that's communism again. And meanwhile, the war in Ukraine rages on for no reason other than the fact that it's under psychopathic status quo. The risk of nuclear war is far lower than it was in the early months of the conflict, but Ukrainian lives are still being thrown away into a proxy war to no one's benefit but the war profiteers. NATO's never going to directly enter the war, and without massive escalation on that level, it's inevitable this thing ends with a peace deal where Ukraine has to give up a fair amount of land. At this point, it's just a bunch of men killing each other and blowing up each other's limbs off for no good reason while they wait for the conclusion to arrive, because a bunch of corrupt bureaucrats far away from the fighting keep postponing it. Well, she's absolutely right. Just for the blood, it's a ceremony. It's a ritual at this point. They're just doing it to do it. You already know the outcome. NATO's not going to, thank God. I mean, the people like John McCain didn't get their wish where Ukraine's drawn into NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. We would have been potentially in a hot war with Russia. That's a red line for them. And people don't understand it. We have no interest there. But Lindsey Graham, John McCain, these war hawks, and it's the apparatus of the State Department. It's the entrenched continuity of the ruling class that wanted this war, and it really is a demonic spirit. I mean, I don't even have to get metaphysical here, folks. Watch them. Watch the people who support continuing the war in Ukraine. It's ritualistic. It's a religion for them. How could you possibly have a dog in that fight when you know the history like I do? Like, what does that even, clearly, Russia can't live with a nuclear-armed NATO member Ukraine, just like we wouldn't live with, a Chinese satellite vassal state of Mexico under the Chinese banner. I don't know why we ask them to do that. She said, it's so ugly. It's so stupid. Such a pointless, idiotic thing for all this suffering and dying to be happening. This whole nightmare could have been avoided with a little diplomacy and a few low-cost concessions from the U.S. empire, but they decided to provoke a war to move a few pieces around on the grand chessboard for the advancement of their planetary domination instead. The world is ruled by sociopaths. Hey, it's a tough pill to swallow. I liked her article, and the reason I brought it up is it's a tough pill to swallow, but that is the reality. And if you get to understand that, then perhaps if you pay attention, think about the root of that phrase. Think about paying attention. You're giving something up. So when we pay attention or we give our energy over to these energy vampires, they are sociopaths and psychopaths. And you start to go, well, I would never do that. Of course you wouldn't, because you have a soul. Have you ever looked at the people from the World Economic Forum? I mean, Oliver Stone had that great, my favorite movie is Oliver Stone's Nixon, for many, many, many reasons. But there's this great scene where he's meeting with the head of the CIA. As President Nixon comes in, he just surprises Richard Helms. And he goes in to meet him, and Helms has this little greenhouse in his office, like, and he's spraying these flowers with water. And he asks Nixon if he liked flowers. And when he looks up, he looks down and he looks up and his eyes are just black. And it was like, Stone never explains. I get it though. But that's the point, is that they're not like you. They don't think that way. So when you pay attention, you start buying into their left-right paradigm or their duopolies or their parties or all this other stuff, you're giving your energy over. Pull that back and be objective. Be able to look at this in a different way. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not. But I definitely look at this differently, and I see them as lunatics. And it is weird, right? You think about the power and influence you have. Why don't you make the world a better place? We're going to clean up the oceans and clean the air. We're just now getting, well, I'll cover this too. This will be, I told you this 3 years ago. The normalization, they started to normalize UFOs. They're going to normalize upper atmospheric aerosol injections, also known as chemtrails, and geoengineering, and it'll be, for your benefit, for the children. We're going to dim the sun, like the Mr. Burns character. But I was talking about that in 2018. And you can go back and look at the headlines. They'll bury stuff, resurface it to see how you take it then. It's a social experiment, and that's being done. Like, you're being farmed. And it's not fun to say that, but that's what's happening. So Caitlin Johnston's not wrong about any of that. And controversial, yes, but definitely takes the wind out of the sails for anyone who's listening to my voice that wants me to join team whatever. I'm just for the truth. And I think that's closer to the truth than whatever. I used to listen to traditional talk radio and other things, and I find no value there. I will not be on those stations because it's a game. And the same thing with a lot of these outlets and pundits and people who want clickbait and everything else. It's a game. And I won't take part in that. The best way to win is not to play. All right, let's do some checking of the gold price. Today, 3,217 Luciferian bankster notes make a troy ounce of the yellow metal. Let's share the screen real quick. We'll put it up on the chart here. And I talked about this on David Knight's show. This is some profit taking. The Chinese just sold off 1 million ounces really quick, and the market bought into that, and I think they're riding that wave. But if you look at the other metrics, the Chinese investors bought 23 tons in the last quarter. This is short term, and I think we'll see a revaluation very soon. Silver's down 32.22 an ounce, down 38 cents since opening bell. And we'll check Bitcoin price real quick. Let's see if we can go to wisewolfbitcoin.com. If you haven't been to wisewolfbitcoin.com, you should go. I'm working on it. It's been a work. We've got a ticker over there if you want to check the price. Stop my screen really quick. Put this up. Yeah, check out wisewolfbitcoin.com. I'm working on it, folks. We'll check the price of Bitcoin. We're talking about stable coins. It tethers at $1. You don't say. Bitcoin, $97,160 per Bitcoin. Only 21 million Bitcoin. Actually, it's only about 16 million. And like I said earlier today, there's a supply shock coming, in my opinion, at least short term. So make sure you go and sign up for the newsletter, all the stuff over on wisewolfbitcoin.com. And you can always check the price there. I have a ticker. All right. Appreciate each and every one of you. I'll be back next week. Be sure and tune into America Unplugged. New Paratruther is out. Just dropped it yesterday. Don Jeffries joins myself and Mr. Anderson for the American Memory Hole. So go check that out. Great show. I love that I get to do what I do and talk to people like Don. You guys take care of each other. We'll see you next week. Beans and I. End of transmission.